Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Cards on the Table MMA podcast, the show where we lay these cards from the past weekend on the table, shuffle them up, and let's deal out some commentary. So we'll start by counting our chips and seeing what happened last weekend. So we actually had three, well, more like 2.5 pretty good cards. The first one of the weekend was Bellator 231, Mir versus Nelson 2. I say 2.5 cards this weekend because this card was pretty fucking bad. You had Jack Hager fought some guy, and Hager kicked him in the nuts twice, and it was a no contest. And Hager insists he didn't, even though there's video evidence of so. So very Bellator. The first one, then the headliner, quote unquote headliner that no one asked for, was Frank Mir versus Roy Nelson. The rematch, it ended in a unanimous decision for Mir. Gonna be honest with you, I did not watch this fight because I just had no desire to watch it, to be honest with you. So we're gonna move on into our second card of the weekend. It was UFC Fight Night 162, bright and early in Singapore. Well, it's not early if you live in Singapore, but for me it was very early in the morning. I ended up watching all the fights on this card after the fact, after it aired. Obviously, I was not gonna wake up that early, especially for this prelim card, because it was not that great. So the first fight of the night was Rafael Pessoa versus Jeff Hughes at heavyweight. Hughes just fought Ted Duffy about a month ago, which ended in an eye poke, if you don't remember. This fight was pretty much a typical heavyweight fight. Pessoa, big boy. I mean, Jeff Hughes is not a small person, but Pessoa made him look tiny. Pessoa wins by unanimous decision, drops Hughes halfway through the second. It was looking for the overhand right the entire fight, and landed it enough to win. And yeah, don't really have much to say about these first few fights, except for this one, Loa Lugbunmi versus Alexandra Albu, a women's strawweight fight. It was very interesting. Loma is coming from Thailand, is a Muay Thai fighter, and is tiny. She was coming up from atom weight. So Michelle Watterson is also atom weight, or previously was, and if Loma was 5'1", I believe, and was just so small, Michelle Watterson looks like a flyweight compared to her. It was crazy. Loma looked really good in the first 2 rounds. Was just owning her in the clinch. Albu in the first round ripped her top and almost ripped her shorts, and should have had a point deducted, but it's MMA, so that wasn't gonna happen. Made some decent adjustments in the third round though, but it was not enough to win. Ate some pretty good shots too, so a pretty good chin on Alexandra Albu, but Loma definitely deserved the win for the first 2 rounds. This next fight you had number 13 Maurice Green versus 14th ranked Sergey Pavlovich at heavyweight. And this kind of just shows you how bad heavyweight is. I mean, I've never really heard of either of these guys. I think I've heard of Maurice Green before, and they're ranked, and they're not even close to the main card. So this fight, Green looked light on the feet, but Pavlovich was just way more powerful. 2 cut heavyweights as well, so that's kind of all you need to be ranked heavyweight, it seems like. But Pavlovich wins by round 1 TKO. Next fight was Enrique Barzola versus Movsar Evloev. Evloev trains with Petr Yan apparently, which is pretty cool. Looked really good in the first round and a half-ish. Pavloev with some really, really good pressure. But Barzola was tough. He couldn't get any offense going at first, but gets a decent takedown, and the fight kind of swung in his favor from there. But it was too little, too late, and Evloev had much more significant strikes, but the fight was closer than that would suggest, I think. But Evloev gets a deserving win by. Next up, we had Alex White versus Rafael Fiziev. I forgot how to say it, but Fiziev looked really good in the beginning. Heavy pressure, heavy leg kicks, big knees as well. Alex White just looked completely out of his element. It was a very impressive performance to start. And White started level changing about halfway through the fight, and that made Fiziev hesitate to throw kicks, and then he was sort of able to get back into it, but Fiziev rocked him again in the third round and was just defending the takedown really well all night. Alex White he started threatening the takedown, but I don't think he ever actually got one. And yeah, this fight was pretty simply just an outclassing by Fiziev, better fighter, perfect takedown defense, did good in the clinch, and yeah, did more than enough to win. I'm actually pretty excited to watch him fight again, though I don't know if he'll be able to be as dominating against a better opponent. And then the final fight on the prelims, we had Randa Markos versus Ashley Yoder. This was a pretty awkward fight. It started off in a weird grappling exchange where Ashley Yoder almost ended up in an inverted triangle while she was on top. Good back and forth on the ground and in the feet, though. There were a lot of transitions. It looked exhausting to be a part of. And yeah, really entertaining fight. This was at women's strawweight, I want to say. Second round, each fighter got in some ground and pound. Yeah, just really close back and forth. Markos ends up winning by split decision. She had less top time, but she did have more significant strikes. And overall, I think the decision was fair. It could have gone either way, though I always lean towards significant strikes as the more important measure. And now let's move on to the main card. To kick it off, you had Muslim Salikov versus Laureano Staropoli at welterweight. Salikov came out well. He had some hard kicks to start off. He had more speed and power, but Staropoli, he was sitting on everything in the first round, just planting and swinging. Salikov looked good, but struggled with getting the finish. He would have him hurt and then not be able to finish. Staropoli came back a little bit in the third round, but the type of thing where he was down 2 rounds going into the third and just didn't have the instinct or the gas tank left to get the finish. I was trying to walk him down, but just was not able to do it. Now here we go. This fight I was second most excited about on the card. We had Cyril Gane versus, I think it's Rontail Mays. This fight was at a really fast pace for heavyweight. This did not look like a heavyweight fight. Both guys are throwing some heat. Gane looks so relaxed in there. They were talking about how Mays' coach was saying he has like the best stamina of any heavyweight, but he was just getting his ass kicked, to be honest with you. He got dropped at the end of the first round, eats a clean flying knee, but survives. Gane just leg kicks were beautiful. He hit some body shots and leg kicks himself, but so composed. It was so strange because he was keeping a good pace, but looked really relaxed, saw everything that was hitting him, which is a very strange thing at heavyweight. He's so technical, and body shots. Yeah, and then he was hitting body shots, leg kicks. He was mixing it up so well. It's so nice to see a technical heavyweight, especially one who has a little bit of bounce in him. He doesn't just sit on everything. He gets a takedown, and then in the last, I think, 20 seconds, hits a heel hook and actually gets it. I don't know when the last heel hook at heavyweight was. Probably, I don't know, Frank Mir. But yeah, he gets the heel hook submission to finish out the fight. Just a huge dominant performance. But I love when fighters just say fuck it and go for a submission at the end, even if they are winning. So yeah, it was a really good fight. Really looking forward to Cyril Gane next. He's got to be ranked after this one. He's 2-0 in the UFC right now. I think he's only 6-0 overall, but just insanely skilled. He's a problem. He's a real fucking problem. Next up, it was either Cyril Gane or this fight that was the most impressive performance. You had Frank Camacho versus Beneil Dariush. This was a lightweight fight. I actually had to rewatch this fight, so I was watching the main card with my friends, and we were talking, and then this fight just kind of ended. So I had to rewatch it later on. Dariush landed a few snappy leg kicks, got a takedown off a single leg trip, and took the back and got the rear naked choke. I don't think he might have taken 1 or 2 punches, but looked insanely good against a pretty good fighter in Frank Camacho, an established, probably top 20, top 25 lightweight, and just got a flawless performance. Looked faster, more powerful, and finishes it off with a round 1 rear naked choke. So yeah, this was probably the most impressive performance of the night. And then the co-main event of the evening, you had Michael Johnson versus Stevie Ray. Michael Johnson back at lightweight, and last week we had the quintessential Greg Hardy fight, and this was the quintessential Michael Johnson fight. He looked fast, as he usually does at lightweight. He's a pretty small lightweight these days. He was always a pretty small one, but yeah, I mean, it's only gotten worse for him, but he looked fast. But Ray was reading his shots well. He was seeing everything. Johnson throwing tons of combinations. Again, typical Michael Johnson fight, throwing lots of combinations when his opponent is only confident throwing single strikes. Then in the third round, Johnson finds a way, of course, gets taken down and just doesn't have the urgency to get up. Ray almost finishes him, which was just quintessential Michael Johnson. And took the back, got some good ground and pound, got the body triangle, and threatened the choke. I wrote in my notes here, Johnson almost snatches defeat from the jaws of victory once again. And then we got to the scorecards, which I do not agree with. So Ray won by majority decision. It was 229-28 and 129-28-28. And I told my friend it was going to be 229-28 for Johnson and one draw, 28-28, because the third round, you could have argued it was a 10-8 round because he dominated. I probably do agree with the fact that it was a 10-8 round. He threatened the submission, did not look in trouble at all. It was a very dominant round. But the judges, they clearly gave round 1 or 2 to him, except for this third judge. The guy who gave him 28-28, I think, scored it correctly, because the only way you can get that is 2 rounds for Johnson, rounds 1 and 2, and then 10-8 for Ray in round 3, which I think is totally fair. But the other judges scored round 1 or 2, 10-9 for Ray, and round 3, 10-9 for Ray. Which I think there's no argument, because Johnson had way more significant strikes in round 1 and 2. He was landing pretty good combinations. He was mixing it up to the body, whereas Ray was struggling in those rounds. He was still trying. He was reading everything, but he also wasn't putting up much offense, and he was throwing single strikes. So I'll move on, but I do not agree with this decision at all. I think 29-28 for Johnson or 28-28 is fair, but 29-28 Ray, especially from 2 judges, does not make any sense to me at all. But whatever, I'll stop talking about it. Let's move on to the main event. You had number 10 Demian Maia versus ranked number 11 Ben Askren. This fight was really fun to watch. You got to see a little bit of everything, because you did kind of want to see them strike, but we also got to see them on the ground. Maia looked strong in the first round, had a pretty good jab. He was sitting on it nicely too. Stumbled Askren with some hooks. He was catching Askren and he was coming in a lot, and I think that was definitely part of the game plan, especially with the jab, because you know what Askren's gonna do. He's gonna try to get the clinch and then take you down from there. Outside trips, inside trips, clinch against the fence, and in hitting him on the way in, you're punishing him for doing that. It looked like Askren did get a takedown with what looked like a knee tap in the first, but definitely lost the first round. And then Maia gassed pretty hard in this fight. I'm not really sure how, because, I mean, Askren was coming at him all night, which I guess being under pressure is tiring, but, I mean, he didn't have to grapple that much in the first round. Askren actually looked okay. I mean, technically, it was not good striking, but as far as competency in the fight, it was good striking, if that makes sense. He was landing some uppercuts in the clinch. He would get the tie clinch and then land some uppercuts. It was pretty nice. I think this was because Maia was getting tired, and there were actually more clinches in this second round. Askren gets a takedown, and Maia reverses with an omoplata. So beautiful. Maia, he would get the butterfly hooks, and instantly when he got taken down, I don't think got any ground and pound in this round. Maia actually gets to mount, but Askren, and he also gets the back, but Askren turns around, scrambles, and finishes on top. And I think that's why this fight was so fun, is because both these guys are so good in the scramble. And it was so high level, and you could tell because it wasn't super fast. And usually what that means is that there's no chaos. It was just pure control from both guys. Maia looked stronger, I want to say, but Askren just obviously is so technical. And yeah, he finishes the third round on top, or the second round on top, and then in the third round, Askren gets an outside trip to start the third. Maia stands back up. Askren throws, I wrote funky shit. He throws a terrible kick and then a back fist. He was throwing these all fight, which I thought was pretty funny. I was saying to my friend, he's keeping it funky. I love it. Askren gets another takedown. Maia reverses with a heel hook this time. Takes Askren's back and gets the rear naked choke to close out the fight. This fight was so entertaining, the third round especially, because when they did get to grapple, you just saw the jiu-jitsu was the difference. Jiu-jitsu was the difference. It was the omoplata, it was the heel hook, yeah. And so round 3 win by Maia by rear naked choke. Also, what was another thing that I almost forgot to mention was the way he finished this was super interesting. So he had Maia's head was on the left side of Askren's head, if I'm remembering this correctly, and so Maia was on the bottom. So he'd take the back, and Maia was on the bottom. If that makes sense. And then what he did is he got the choke underneath, and then he went palm to palm. But then what he did instead is he grabbed with his left arm. So he was choking with his left arm. He grabbed Askren's right shoulder with his left hand and squeezed with that. Like, he didn't use his right hand, which I thought was super interesting because usually most people need 2 hands to finish a choke. I definitely do. Because the way you're taught to defend a choke is you go 2-on-1. But if they only need 1 hand to choke you, what are you supposed to do? So I thought that was super interesting. I have not seen it, but Maia just has that black belt squeeze. And yeah, it came through for him. So, great fight. The stand-up, again, not the best quality, but no one was expecting good quality stand-up. We just wanted to see a little bit of stand-up to see how good Askren was on the feet, and a little bit of grappling. Mostly the grappling, and the grappling definitely did not disappoint. So yeah, that closes out UFC Fight Night 162. This fight, it was decent. It wasn't near, not, I'd say it's about a 5 or 6 out of 10. There were some okay fights on it. You had Cyril Gane, Michael Johnson. The last 4 fights were definitely good, but the rest of them, you had some good prospects in Rafael Fiziev and Movsar Evloev, or however you say that. There's some good prospects to look out for. Not much name power on this card, but yeah, some reasonably entertaining fights. So next we go to Bellator 232 in Huntsville, Connecticut, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. This was also on Saturday night, I believe. So, I don't know, in watching this event, I watched it as well, and it kind of reminds me why I don't watch Bellator as often and don't take it as seriously. So, they make so many mistakes, so Bellator still does not put the fighter names on the screen at all times, and the UFC did the same thing until very recently, as in a year or 2 ago, probably. It was, you need to put the fighter names on the card, especially if you know you don't have the most recognizable fighters. That otherwise, how is the casual fan supposed to know? Because you don't have the most recognizable fighters. Like, how many people know who Nick Newell or Manny Miro is? I had to look it up on Tapology because I'm not super familiar with them. Most people aren't going to care enough to do that. And then how are people supposed to recognize your fighters? And then something about the main events being cursed and just having terrible luck. You had Hager versus whoever he fought. You had the nut shot. You had Mitrione with was that also a groin strike? I can't remember. Or was it the mouthpiece thing? Either way. And then you also have Big John on commentary still. Like this, I always watch them on mute. I put on a podcast, just relaxed, and just watch the fights because I can't stand Big John on commentary. And I still don't know what's up with the 50 Cent thing, but we're just gonna move on from that. Let's get on with the fights. I only watched the main card, and I think I didn't watch the full main card. I watched 4 fights, so I think there was one I didn't watch, but it's whatever. So the first fight, you had Nick Newell versus Manny Miro. This was a catchweight at 160 pounds. I think because one of these guys was short notice. I believe Miro was short notice. So I looked at the Tapology page. Only three people picked Miro to win. Neil was a minus 900 favorite again, according to Tapology. Um, and he's the guy who only has one arm. I think he used to be a wrestler. And yeah, so pretty interesting. I completely forgot about him. I completely forgot he signed with Bellator. That's my bad. Yeah, he spends the entire first round in full mount after threatening guillotine. He was chasing single legs. Throughout the second round was less successful. Miro probably won the second round. Neil won the first round. Third round looked like Miro gassed a little bit, and Miro got a lot stronger and spent the full round on top. Miro wins by unanimous decision. I think that's a very fair scorecard because Newell, if I remember correctly, was not doing much in the second round, just constantly chasing single legs and eating strikes on the way in. Didn't really put up any offense, any successful offense. I mean, he was going for single legs, but wasn't hitting them. Next fight, you had Patrick Mix versus Isaiah Chapman. This was a bantamweight fight. Mix slams Chapman, takes the back, gets a body triangle, and holds the position. So Chapman, I think he shook him off once, but then Mix got right back on it, got the body triangle, and then as Chapman was trying to stand up, got a knee bar. Similar, I think it was the way Zabit did it, I want to say. So yeah, not much happened in this fight. It was basically slam, back take, rear naked choke threat, knee bar. And then you had Paul Daly versus, I think it was Saad Awad. This was a catchweight at 175 pounds. This was the co-main. Another short notice fight. I forgot who was short notice. I think it was Awad. Neither fighter was throwing. Awad was moving a lot. I don't know if it was just his striking style, but he looked very uncomfortable in the first round. And then the second, they come out and they let it go, straight from the get-go. So the finish was kind of weird here, because it looked like he got hit with something, and he got wobbled. But I'm not sure what it was. I mean, we know Daly's got power. His nickname is Semtex, I believe, and that left hook is a nuclear bomb. But I didn't see anything super clear. But either way, Daly, after Awad gets wobbled by something, maybe he rolled his ankle, or maybe he just got tired, because they were swinging in the second round. But Daly, he lands the left hook, lands a few more strikes, gets the ground and pound, and gets the stoppage. So this is a round 2 TKO. And then the main event, you had the rematch of Rory MacDonald versus Douglas Lima for the welterweight title, and also to finish out the welterweight tournament belt. So I believe this is 2 belts on the line. In this fight, you had Rory MacDonald's title belt, and then you had the belt for the welterweight championship. And this is obviously what Bellator was going for, because these were the 2 best fighters in the tournament. And just a recap of the first matchup, this was MacDonald's second fight in Bellator. He won by unanimous decision to claim the Bellator welterweight title. And this was the fight where he looked good, he wrestled really well, but Douglas Lima hit him with some really hard leg kicks, and MacDonald actually got carried out of the ring, or the octagon. I don't know what Bellator calls it. After the decision, he had to get carried out by his coaches because his legs were so fucked up. So this was a very, very boring fight. The first one was not that exciting in and of itself. This one was way worse. Rory just was so hesitant. This whole fight was circle right, circle right, circle right, circle right. Douglas Lima in the center of the cage, Rory circling right away from the leg kicks, it looked like. So he'd do that. He would do 5 to 10 seconds of circling, stop, try single leg, and then get stuffed. They might clinch. Rory tried some outside trips all fight, and they never really worked. Did he get any takedowns? He might have got 1 or 2. I can't remember at this point. I don't think he did. I didn't write down any takedowns. Second round, there were barely any punches thrown. I mean, no one was throwing any combinations. Lima was being, if you want to be nice, you could say neither fighter was super urgent. Yeah, it was just landing more, so he deserves the points. Third round, at least they're swinging now. Rory tries another single leg. Lima started landing leg kicks in the third round as well, and was getting better at the exchanges. Fourth round, Rory gets stumbled by a leg kick. I think he was having some PTSD. He wasn't committing to anything. Kept going for outside trips. And again, it wasn't working. And really, that seems like all you have to do against Rory is he doesn't have any of the striking fundamentals that he used to. It's just you have to be patient and you have to, because he's not really coming towards you at this point if he thinks you have power anymore, which is kind of sad, but it's just the reality. Round 5, Rory finally gets a takedown and then gets swept right away by Lima's butterfly hook guard. Rory almost gets an armbar actually, but gets slammed out of it. And then the fight finishes with Rory giving him his back, Lima landing some ground and pound, and then in the last few seconds, Rory gets a nice sweep with a minute and lands a little bit of ground and pound to finish it out. And then the winner by unanimous decision, the welterweight Grand Prix winner and the new welterweight Bellator champion is Lima by unanimous decision. I just feel like I should be more excited, but I'm really not. I mean, yeah, Rory, he's got to be done at this point, right? I don't know. It's really sad. The decline since the Robbie Lawler fight has been very steep, very steep. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna move on. It just kind of makes me sad. Good for Douglas Lima. He was the better fighter in this fight, which it's not saying much. If he beat Rory MacDonald 5 years ago, that would be saying something. And the other thing is, Rory MacDonald, he's about 30, 31. He's really young. It's really sad to see him like this, but he's had a very old career, I want to say. Like, he's been in the game since he was 18, 20. He made his UFC debut at 20, I think. And he was, like, fighting good competition straight away. So, his fight years are old. It's like how Aldo's only 32 or 33, but he's old in fight years. Speaking of Aldo, here's our first bit of news today. Aldo versus Marlon Moraes at bantamweight, and Uriah Faber versus Petr Yan, both fights at bantamweight, confirmed for UFC 245. UFC 245, an insanely stacked card at this point. Let me look up the card real quick. This card is nuts. So far for this card, you have Petr Yan versus Uriah Faber, Marlon Moraes versus Jose Aldo. I'm just going to go over the ones I recognize. You have Brendan Moreno versus Kai Kara France, Matt Brown versus Ben Saunders, Jessica Ai versus Viviane Ariano. And then you have 3 title fights. You have Amanda Nunes versus Jordan Durandamy. Who cares? Max Holloway versus Alexander Volkanovski. And then you have Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington. Holy shit, what a card. These next 2 UFC cards are stacked. Absolutely stacked. That's insane. So next bit of news. Nate Diaz, this was right after I recorded last week's episode. Nate Diaz, they found he had SARMs. I forget exactly what it stands for. It's like something androgen receptor modules, I believe. They found a quote at, what was it? Abnormal finding or whatever terminology they use. He is cleared now. Right after the podcast, they were saying there was an adverse finding. I believe that's the term they use. So these SARMs, that's just what I'm gonna call SARMs. They're like a weaker form of anabolic steroids. So they promote testosterone production, just not to the extent that anabolic steroids do. But he is cleared now. The fight is still on. And USADA actually wanted him to keep fighting, but Nate Diaz posted himself on his own social media that they had found these things and that he wanted to say, he didn't want to fight with that. But I guess he's cleared now. Who knows? USADA is just, I really don't take them that seriously anymore. If anyone has even a hint of draw to them, they will make the fight happen. I mean, they cleared this within, 24 hours? So, yeah, make of that what you will. Next bit of news. It's not really news. It's more just stuff I found cool. This was posted by user Colorblind Chameleon on Reddit on r/MMA. He pointed out that UFC 244 has some of the closest betting odds I've ever seen throughout the card. And again, we're going to go through the card a little bit later after the next few bits of news. Shane Burgos is the biggest favorite on the card at just minus 215. Now that is not a very, I mean, it is somewhat close. I think it's still considered a slight moderate favorite. But yeah, everyone else is pretty much under minus 200. A lot of these fights, both fighters are in the minuses, which is, again, I've never seen that before, which is super cool. So yeah, that was just an interesting observation I wanted to point out. Next bit of news, Ben Askren says he's considering retirement after his last loss. I forget the exact quote, but basically he was saying he came to the UFC to prove he was the best fighter in the world, and clearly that's not how it's gone. Ben Askren, he's always been super self-aware. You know, when he lost, he was like, yeah, he found a weakness and used it. He's always been super candid, which part of the reason I like him. I wasn't a fanboy of him as he came in, but he won me over as he got here and showed that he had the mental fortitude for sure. And I always respect fighters that say stuff like that. And we talked about Uriah Faber already, but apparently he's on a new 6-fight contract, which is crazy to me. I thought he was retired, but until he fought, I think it was Ricky. Yeah, Uriah Faber says he has a 6-fight contract. Yeah, so it sounds like he had 3 fights previously, and they renegotiated and extended it. Interesting. Interesting indeed. He's not that old. He's just old in fight years. He's one of the OG bantamweights. I mean, him and Dominic Cruz basically founded that division, right? And then his whole team Alpha Male is like half the UFC, not half the UFC bantamweights, but a good number. And they're still decent. You know, TJ Dillashaw was their crown jewel. He left. Cody Garbrandt was their crown jewel, and we know what's up with him. Well, actually, we don't know what's up with him, and that's part of that kind of tells you where we're at. So Adesanya obviously called out Paulo Costa right after he won the title, but Paulo Costa is reportedly out for 8 months with bicep surgery. Apparently, I believe he sustained the injury in February and is going into surgery. Dana White says he's going to be out for 8 months, and they're looking for a new title shot. Adesanya called out Romero, and Romero, I believe, responded saying he's down. Dana White said there will be no super fight with Jon Jones, which is good, because it's insane to get a super fight when you haven't defended your title. Henry Cejudo, looking at you. I guess he did technically defend, but whatever. That whole thing was very strange. But Costa's manager, Waleed Ismail, has said Costa will be back by April after recovering from his surgery, and there is no need to look for another title fight. I know Adesanya wants to stay active, so we'll see. I think Adesanya wouldn't be totally okay with fighting for Romero and then Costa. Dude is... I'm so happy Adesanya's the title holder, because he's going to stay active, and we need more active champions in the UFC. It makes the sport so much more exciting. And then, in, I don't know, slightly less important news, Kat Zingano fights a multi-fight deal with Bellator at featherweight. I don't know the number of fights, but people are saying, Cyborg, if she does fight Cyborg, she's just going to get her ass kicked. Yeah, there's really not much to say about that. Just figured I'd bring it up because Kat Zingano is a little bit of a name. And then my last bit of news, and again, just something I found a little bit interesting. A study in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning shows that MMA athletes who cut more weight lose more often. So it's not a definitive study. This is called a descriptive study, meaning there's not as much controlling for variables. The sample size is only 75, and only 2 female fighters were surveyed as well. So 73 men and 2 women, and also some of the results were self-reported. So again, not the most conclusive study, but that doesn't mean there's not some interesting stuff. This was posted by the_Rick_Sanchez on Reddit, on the RMMA subreddit once again. So I'm just going to point out a few things I read through the study, and wrote down. So MMA athletes cut more weight than other combat sports. So that's compared to wrestling, jiu-jitsu, etc. And they pointed out one reason for this, for the increased cutting, is athletes have much more time to rehydrate before the fight. So MMA weigh-ins on average are 24 hours before the fight, whereas other combat sports usually have them 6 to 12 hours. And again, it varies on the organization and the sport, but just the averages, it's 24 hours to rehydrate. So naturally, you will, if you have more time to recover, then you will be willing to cut more weight. That's what I was trying to say. So athletes who cut more than 10% were more likely to lose, though interestingly enough, the method of how they lost did not differ. So for example, you might think athletes who cut more weight might be more susceptible to being knocked out or submitted because they're not as strong and their brain isn't as hydrated. But actually, the methods of loss, so the ratios of knockouts to submissions to decisions, was the same. So that was probably one of the more interesting things. And I believe for every 1 unit of body mass, BM cut, the chances of losing increased, I believe it was 1.6%. So that was about the ratio. And again, this is not the most descriptive study, or it is a descriptive study, which means it's not the most conclusive thing. But still, there's some interesting observations, and we definitely need more research into this area. And yeah, this doesn't go over this does not go over long-term effects and stuff like that. But still, I think it's interesting, and again, we need more research into this. So moving on, that wraps up our news section. Today now we're gonna look ahead at UFC 244. What a fucking card we have here. Some super good fights. So we'll start at the bottom. I don't know too much about the the prelims are somewhat interesting, and then the main card is amazing. So we'll start at the bottom and just work our way up. First fight, you have Julio Arce or Arce. I'm gonna go with Arce versus Hakeem Dawodo. This is a featherweight fight, and again, remember all these odds are super close odds wise. So that's, I don't know, all these fights should be good because usually if the fight is close, it's interesting. Hakeem is the minus 135 favorite. Both fighters are pretty well rounded. So yeah. Next fight, you have Lyman Good versus Chance Recounter. I'm not sure how to say that again. This is a welterweight fight. I know Lyman Good just lost to Damian Maia somewhat recently. He's the slight favorite, minus 135 again. Then you have Katlyn Shukid. Wow, some weird names on this card. Shukajan versus Jennifer Maia. This is at women's flyweight. Apparently, this is a top contender at women's flyweight. I know I'm not familiar with Shukajan. Yeah, top contender fight at women's flyweight, but really, who cares? And then you have Andrei Arlovsky versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik at heavyweight. Jairzinho is the minus 155 favorite. Looks like he's favored to win by knockout according to Tapology. But I looked into this. Arlovsky's last 8 fights have ended in decisions. So he's the king of decisions, so you do that with what you will. I mean, he finds a way to make it boring. I mean, his last few fights have not been exciting in the slightest. Next up, you have Brad Tavares versus Edmen Shahbazyan. This is a middleweight fight. The odds are completely even for this fight, according to Tapology. Just an interesting fact. Brad Tavares' last fight was Israel Adesanya. Adesanya has fought 4 times since Tavares last fought, which is crazy. It just shows you how active Adesanya is and how good he is. He went from fighting Brad Tavares, who's a middleweight, I guess you could say. He's pretty good. And if you can beat him, you're in the top half of middleweight rankings, probably most likely. But it shows you how the competition has changed. Next up, I believe this is the first fight. That Brad Tavares versus Edmen Shahbazyan is the first fight on the prelims. And then you have Shane Burgos versus Makwan Amirkhani. This is a featherweight fight, I believe. Shane, yeah, featherweight. So Shane Burgos is minus 250 favorite. Oh, I think he's actually the highest. He's minus 250 now. So he used to be minus 215. So he's the biggest favorite on the card. His lesson, which Cub Swanson isn't what he used to be, but he is coming off that win over Kron Gracie. So to make of that what you will, I don't know anything about his opponent. So we're just going to move on. Then you have Corey Anderson versus Johnny Walker, light heavyweight fight. This fight is super interesting. Anderson is obviously a top light heavyweight, top 10 for sure. This is the fight we're waiting for Johnny Walker to have. Anderson is on a three-fight winning streak over Ilir Latifi, Glover Teixeira, and Patrick Cummings. So pretty decent competition as far as light heavyweight is concerned. Ilir Latifi obviously going to heavyweight now. Not the best competition. These aren't top 5 fighters, but they're also contenders at light heavyweight, and that's the reality of the division. And obviously Johnny Walker has been crushing it throughout his UFC run. Has just looked super awkward in the best way possible. Super excited to see how he does against not the most exciting fighter in Corey Anderson. Corey Anderson he has lost to Jimmy Manawa and stuff like that, so you never know with him. You don't really know what's gonna come out. But he is on a 3-fight winning streak, and whoever wins this fight is probably 1 fight away from a title shot. Again, that's just the reality of the division. Walker is the minus 165 favorite, which I think is pretty fair odds. I'm very excited for this fight. I'm excited to see. I mean, this is going to be the case in every Johnny Walker fight until we see him go the distance, or at least get past the first round. Really, can he maintain that style? He's obviously insanely good at timing people, and throwing feints and then working off of those feints. And then the question is, how can he work with that? How does that look when it goes in the third rounds? Does he gas? He does carry a lot of muscle. He's a big fighter. I think he's 6'5", and he's very muscular. So how's his cardio? But yeah, it's always a treat to watch him fight, even if it's a very short fight. Yeah, I'm very excited for this fight. So we go from that fight into the main card, and we started off with a banger. We have Kevin Lee versus Gregor Gillespie at lightweight. Kevin Lee 1-3 in his last 4 fights. I believe his last 2 losses were at welterweight, or was it just the one? I can't remember. But yeah, he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights, coming off a loss to Rafael dos Anjos, where he got thoroughly outclassed. Though he is Gillespie's biggest test so far, and this is why this is such an interesting fight. You have a fight where you have a guy who seems to have been figured out in Kevin Lee, where he's, some people would argue he's on the decline. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but he doesn't have the same, I don't look at him as having the same potential that he used to against a guy who's on the come up in Gregor Gillespie. Gillespie, his best win is against Yancy Medeiros, so I was surprised Medeiros was even in the UFC when they fought. I'm also very surprised that Lee is back at lightweight, because that cut I know was horrible for him. He was one of the guys who was pushing for a 165 division, because he's not really at that 170 size yet. I thought he was going to commit to that. But he's too big for lightweight for his own good. The cut is hard. He carries too much. I don't know. He gasses hard, and it's very apparent when he does. Gillespie is the minus 165 favorite. Lee is plus 135. I think that's fair. It's curious. It really depends on Kevin Lee. Because both these guys really want to take you down. I guess Kevin Lee might be the better striker, but then can he avoid being taken down is the question. Gillespie has excellent ground and pound, and Lee, he's at TriStar now. That's the other thing. I forgot about that until right now. Lee is training at TriStar in Canada now with Faraz Sahabi. I don't think we'll see much of a difference, given it only happened a few months ago. But if he sticks with this gym, I could see that really improving him if he sticks with it. That's always been the thing with Kevin Lee, is he has this, 84-inch reach at lightweight, which is just insane. He has an incredible build. Like, his shoulders are huge, and that's part of the reason why he's reach. And the thing is, he gasses so hard, and I think if Firas Zahabi, who's an excellent coach, if he can change up the game plan, and also Kevin Lee needs to get away from the body triangles because it doesn't work anymore. People are so good defending rear naked chokes. I think it's why he can't beat Al Iaquinta, because Al has really good submission defense, as much as I think Al Iaquinta is a little bit overrated. Maybe less so now that he's lost a few fights. But after the Khabib fight, he was very overrated. The one thing he is good at is defending submissions. He's pretty good crafty. And when Kevin Lee would take the back, he wasn't able to do anything with it. He threatened the submission, and Iaquinta knew how to just relax, go 2-on-1, into the phone, do all the right things, and then eventually turn around in the guard. I think if Lee focused on what the AKA guys do, sort of the fence grinding style, I think that would work much more in his favor. And I think Firas Zahabi was one of the first guys to kind of implement that, so I think this could be very interesting. The next fight we have Derek Lewis versus Blagoy Ivanov. Let me just get another sip of water real quick. This fight, obviously a heavyweight. Lewis on a 2-fight winning streak. And, I mean, Derek Lewis fights, you're always going to say one of two things. There's always two options in a Lewis fight. I guess there's the option where he gets dominated the whole fight, no matter how long the fight is. And there's the option where he gets dominated the whole fight and then gets a knockout somehow, some way. Those are the two options in a Derek Lewis fight. It's either he gets knocked out after being dominated, or he gets dominated and then gets the knockout. And that's of minus 125 for Ivanov and Lewis minus 105. So that Ivanov's a slight favorite. Again, Lewis fights, there's really no point in predicting them because there's one of two things going to happen. So yeah, let's move on to the third to last fight of the evening. You have a very exciting fight in Stephen Thompson versus Vicente Luque. It's a contender fight. Now let's see, either of these guys is, after this fight, we're probably 2 fights away from a title shot. So Wonder Boy, he's actually only won 1 fight of his last 5. He had the majority draw with Woodley. He's had losses to Pettis, a loss to Woodley again, and the loss to Darren Till, I believe, was the other one. So he's also 36, so a lot of people think he's on the decline. Another thing of note is his style, that karate style. We saw it with Lyoto Machida as well. Doesn't age that well since it relies a lot on reaction times and predicting what your opponent will do. And while the prediction, that probably only gets better as you get older, the reaction times do get worse. And we saw what Pettis did. What he did was not a fluke, that knockout. He saw that Wonder Boy has this tendency to take a second. Obviously, when you throw a kick, you have to land and then move back to position after you kick, because you put all this energy into one motion. And Pettis timed that, waited for him to plant his foot after the kick, and landed that straight right down the pipe. And Wonder Boy does get dropped a lot. I don't think he has a bad chin, but he gets hit in bad spots where he can't necessarily roll with the punches all the time. Vicente Luque, obviously so much fun to watch. He's on a 6-fight win streak, and his last loss was against Leon Edwards, which is a loss that has aged very well. And I do think that is important. I think just because if you lost to a good fighter, that's not necessarily such a bad thing. This should be a very exciting fight. Both fighters are technical strikers. They're both tough as hell. As I said, Thompson, he gets dropped a lot, but it's hard to finish him. I don't think he's been finished in those losses, except by Pettis, obviously. And Pettis caught him clean. Oops, my mic just fell. Sorry about that, guys. One sec. And yeah, both fighters, again, this is exciting because both fighters are not afraid to trade and take one to give one. Thompson is the minus 125 favorite. Luque is minus 105. Again, another fight where both fighters have favorable odds, which is usually pretty rare, but it's the case with quite a few fighters on this card. I wish this fight was a 5-rounder because it's going to be very exciting. Another fight I wish was a 5-rounder, Kelvin Gastelum versus Darren Till. Darren Till's middleweight debut. Even though in my mind he's been there the whole time, really. Gastelum is the heavy favorite. He's minus 200. This, I think a lot of people are not, including myself, are not fans of this fight. It is, in my opinion, way too difficult of a fight for Till. I thought Gastelum wasn't underrated anymore. I thought people were finally rating him after the Adesanya fight, and we know how good Adesanya is now. Gastelum has insane hand speed, insane power. He's got great ground game. I mean, Gastelum, he's just a great fighter. He's very well rounded. He can wrestle, he can strike, he's got great jiu-jitsu. And Till, we just don't know. We don't know if he can handle the power, speed, because basically Gastelum's essentially a welterweight. He's very small for the division. Till's a big welterweight, really. I don't know if you guys have seen pictures of him. The name Gorilla has never been more fitting. And Darren Till, I looked at this actually. He used to be a middleweight and then started cutting to a welterweight. I think it was 3 fights before he joined the UFC, maybe 2 fights. So he hasn't fought a middleweight in 5 years. He's never fought someone at this high of a level before at a middleweight, obviously. I think he was fighting in, I want to say, Cage Warriors last time he fought at middleweight. That might be wrong, but it was a promotion doesn't have anyone near Gastelum's talent. I struggle to see, I mean, Darren Till's only method of victory is either gets a knockout or he controls the distance and his chin is able to withhold the punishment. I don't think it can against Gastelum. I mean, you saw with it, if Gastelum can get in range against Adesanya, I think he can do that twice as well against Darren Till, because Gastelum's just so fast. He's so good at closing the distance. He's obviously tough as hell. I firmly believe he can take a Darren Till shot a few times before he goes down. I think he's a serious threat to everyone, and especially someone who's never fought at high level in middleweight. So yeah, I think this is way too tough of a fight for Till. But we'll see. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. I think Gastelum being minus 200 is almost generous to Till. But again, we'll see. And then we'll move on to the main event, Jorge Masvidal versus Nate Diaz, against all odds, against all SARMs. It has come true. I almost don't want to talk about the BMF title because I think it's a little bit stupid. But it is exciting. It's bringing people in. So fair enough. Anything that brings more attention to the sport, fine. As cringy as it may seem, fine. Masvidal is the minus 170 favorite. Diaz is plus 140. The odds actually surprised me how favored Masvidal is, given how good Diaz looked against Pettis, who we know is a pretty good fighter. Masvidal, but the more I looked into it, the more I kind of agree, because I think Dan Hardy brought this up in his UFC Inside the Octagon, is Masvidal is a fighter who has a very high fight IQ and knows fighters' weaknesses, and you notice this in his Darren Till fight, and I think the Askren fight as well. He goes in with a few set things of what he knows will work, and even if it doesn't work right away, he will keep going to that. So that's kind of vague, but so against Darren Till, he kept throwing the hooks, the left hook, right hook that eventually knocked Till out. He kept throwing it because he knows, given how Till moves, he does the zombie to get away from people, so he'll stick his arm straight out, head straight in the air. And because Masvidal has such a long hook that uses the full extent of his reach, he knows eventually I'll reach him. And he kept testing it. He wouldn't commit to it fully. Maybe he committed once a round, and then he finally got the knockout with that exact combination. He kept throwing it. And against Askren, obviously he only had to throw one strike in that fight to finish it. But I think had the fight gone on at the beginning of every round and every time there was any separation and Askren was bending over, he would have gone for the knee. I think Masvidal has the set things in his mind that he will use. And the thing about Diaz is, as good as he looked against Pettis, I think he has the better ground game, because Pettis has a good ground game, and Nate looked so much stronger, so much more controlling, so much more threatening on the ground. So if this fight does get to the ground, Diaz has that's where he wants the fight. But back to what I was saying, Diaz, he doesn't have the best wrestling, which I think he might need to win this fight. But he's always susceptible to leg kicks. That's what we know. He's a slow starter, so I expect Masvidal, if he follows the same pattern, he'll come out strong, and he'll throw a lot of leg kicks, and he'll throw a lot of fast strikes, so a lot of straight punches. And then once he gets more confident, then maybe he'll start mixing in the hooks. I would expect a lot of kicks and straight punches. Let me see what else I have in my notes here. Again, Nate needs to pressure. One thing, and if he can get the fight to the ground, I do think he has the advantage. Masvidal, again though, he has good takedown defense, so he has the potential to neutralize Nate's biggest threat. And I think that's so interesting about this fight. Furthermore, a few more observations here. Till was catching a lot of kicks in the first round of the Masvidal fight, and I think Nate could potentially do that to get a takedown instead of relying on wrestling. I think that would be very interesting. We haven't seen Nate catch a lot of kicks. It's not really their style. But I think that could be a useful tool for him to get the fight where, again, in my opinion, he has the best advantage. I don't know if this is one of those things where they have like an agreement to not take it to the ground. I think it would be kind of silly because it is an MMA fight, but I wouldn't put it past them. This isn't super relevant to the fight if Nate does throw kicks. I think he threw a couple against Pettis, but it's not his style again. Masvidal likes catching kicks and then punching while holding the leg. And it's kind of an awkward position, and I think we will see a few of those awkward positions in this fight. Both fighters kind of unorthodox in their striking, not necessarily Nate more, but it looks like Masvidal is comfortable in getting to those positions. He is a very experienced striker, of course. That's what he's known for. Another one, just Till was catching Masvidal with uppercuts when he did have him against the cage, and this is another area where I think Nate has the advantage, because I do think Nate will be the pressure fighter, especially after the first round, because that's not really Masvidal's style. But if Nate can get Masvidal flat with his back against the cage and keep him there, I think that's where he has the chance. I know he has the cardio to do it. This is a 5-round fight, so he can wear on Masvidal. But yeah, those uppercuts. Nate loves throwing uppercuts when his opponents are against the cage. He loves just leashing on them with those, the classic Diaz, 50% combination, and then he'll throw in a hard body shot or throw in a hard uppercut or a hard right hook. And I think that's where he will have the biggest advantage on the feet. So yeah, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode. We pretty much covered everything I wanted to. Much longer than next episode, but a lot of stuff to cover this weekend. Again, I'm so excited for 244. I hope you guys are too. I hope it's a great card. I hope it's not a cursed main event like Bellator's are. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.